Before you decide the little carved lady in your jewelry box is just an old-fashioned pin nobody wants, sit down with me a moment. You know the one I mean. A cream profile of a woman, peach or brown behind her, pinned to a coat that hasn't left the closet in 30 years, or face down in a drawer under a tangle of chains. Everyone has walked past her. Nobody has picked her up. And that quiet neglect has cost American families real money for 100 years. Today, we're counting down 15 kinds of cameo jewelry that can be secretly worth a fortune. But I'll do this differently than you may be used to. I am not going to throw wild numbers at you or promise the pin in your mother's drawer will pay off your house. Other videos do that, and they all end the same way, with a good woman driving home from a jeweler's shop feeling foolish and a little bit small. I'd rather hand you a pair of eyes. Real tests you can run at your kitchen table tonight with a lamp and your reading glasses. Real prices from real sale rooms. And stay with me to number 1, because number 1 is the one even dealers walk past, and it hides in plain sight. Number 15, the plain shell cameo, and the frame nobody checks. We start with the piece nearly every American family has, that classic white profile on a soft peach ground. And I'll be honest right away, the carving itself is usually not where the money is, but turn her over, because for a very long time, a decent cameo was considered worth setting properly, and properly meant gold. Look along the rim, or on the back of the pin stem, for a tiny stamp. 14K, 18K, or 3 little numbers, 585 or 750, which is the European way of saying the same thing. But if you see the letters GF, or something reading 1/20th 12K GF, that is gold-filled. GP is gold-plated. Those are not solid gold, and wishing won't make them so. When the mark is real and the frame is heavy, though, that mount can quietly be worth more than the carving it holds. People sell a cameo for $40 because they don't care for the lady's hairstyle, and hand over a solid gold frame for free. The whole lesson of this video sits right here at number 15. The value is almost never in the part you were looking at. Number 14, the cameo that dates itself, on the back of the pin. This one isn't a material, it's a skill. And once you have it, you'll never look at an old brooch the same way again. Flip any cameo brooch over and study the little mechanism holding the pin closed. That scrap of metal is a calendar, a simple open hook shaped like the letter C with no safety catch at all, and a pin stem so long it juts past the edge of the brooch, points you toward the middle 1800s. That long pin wasn't a mistake. It was built to push through the thick fabrics women actually wore. A little cylinder holding the hinge, what collectors call a tube hinge, is also a 19th century sign, but a rolling safety catch, the kind that spins closed under your thumb, puts you squarely in the 20th century. Which isn't bad. It just isn't Victorian, no matter what the seller told you. Be fair, now. Clasps get replaced, and a repair is honest. But when the clasp, the hinge, the metal mark, and the carving all agree with one another, that agreement is what an appraiser is quietly checking in about 4 seconds while you're still talking. Number 13, the Wedgwood cameo, and the mark most people read backwards. You know this one on sight. Powder blue with a raised white figure. A cherub, a goddess, something calm and classical. Josiah Wedgwood perfected this stoneware, called jasperware, in the 1770s, imitating ancient carved cameos in clay. Now listen closely, because I'm about to correct something repeated all over the internet. People will tell you the sign of a real, valuable Wedgwood is a mark reading Wedgwood, made in England. That is exactly backwards. The plain impressed word Wedgwood, standing alone, generally means a piece made before 1860. That's the old material. The word England was added because of an American law, the McKinley Tariff Act of 1891, and made in England only came into use around 1908, so the mark you were told to hunt for is the mark that says your piece is 20th century. Handsome, yes. Rare, no. One more, and this one is free money. If the word is spelled Wedgwood with an extra it is not Wedgwood. It never was. And colour is where the money hides. Everybody has pale blue. It's the lilac, the yellow, and above all the deep crimson that collectors chase. Number 12, the lady who faces the wrong way. Here's a question I want you to actually go answer tonight. Which direction is your cameo facing? Because the overwhelming majority of carved profiles face right. That's simply how the trade ran, which means a profile facing left is genuinely uncommon. And uncommon is the engine of every antiques market there is. Don't take my word for it. On the American Antiques Roadshow, a guest brought in a shell cameo in a gold frame, and the appraiser said out loud that in all his years he almost never sees one facing left. That piece was put at $1,500 to $2,000 at auction, and $3,000 for insurance. So go look. And while you're there, ask the second question. Who is she? A man is scarcer than a woman. A child is scarcer still. A face looking straight out at you, instead of in profile, is rarer yet. Then there's my favourite oddity, which almost no family recognises. Collectors call it a gryllus, a strange, playful jumble of heads and creatures fused together, sometimes sharing a single eye. They look bizarre. They are wonderful. A Hardstone gryllus ring sold at Bonham's for £2,640, number 11, the cameo that copies a famous painting. Some cameos aren't an invented lady at all. They're careful little copies of famous artworks. Sculpture by Antonio Canova. Sculpture by the Great Dane, Bertel Thorvaldsen. And paintings. Yes, paintings, translated into shell. On the Antiques Roadshow, an appraiser once discussed a family's cameo collection on air, and viewers wrote in afterward to point something out. One of those cameos, a tender scene of a mother and children, wasn't a family portrait at all. It was Raphael. The Madonna of the Chair, painted in 1514, hanging today in the Pitti Palace in Florence. Sit with that. Somebody's grandmother owned a hand-carved miniature of a Renaissance masterpiece, and the family called it the pin with the baby on it. So here's your homework. If your cameo shows a scene rather than a single face, a woman in a chariot, a winged figure, a mother and child, type a description into an image search tonight. If your carver was copying Raphael or Canova or a Roman original, you have just multiplied both the story and the value. Number 10. The Grand Tour Lava Cameo. These are the dusty ones. Tan, grey, muddy brown, matte as chalk. No shine, no sparkle. They lose every beauty contest in the jewellery box, but the story is a good one. In the 1800s, well-off travellers took what was called the Grand Tour, and Naples was a required stop, right under Mount Vesuvius. They came home with cameos carved from volcanic stone. Wearing one said, quietly, "I have seen the world. Now I have to be straight with you." There's a number circulating online claiming the average antique lava cameo is worth around $3,000. That number comes from dealer asking prices, not from sales. What a shop hopes to get, and what a piece actually brings, are two very different animals. What genuinely moves a lava cameo into money is deep, high relief, where the figures stand almost free of the background. Undercutting you can see with a magnifier. Unusual subjects, the lava carvers loved portraits of famous composers. And above all, a matched set in its original case. And here's a trap that catches even seasoned dealers. Moulded pieces made from a chalky mineral deposit called dripstone get sold as hand-carved lava all the time. If the surface is perfectly uniform, the relief shallow, the details soft and melted, you may be holding a mould, not a carving. Number 9. The Coral Cameo. And the truth about the law. Precious coral. Deep red at one end of the scale, and at the other, that pale blushing pink the trade calls angel skin. Coral is brutal to carve, brittle, unforgiving. Now, you'll hear it said constantly that coral harvesting has been banned worldwide, and that's why antique coral has soared. I looked into that carefully. It isn't true. There is no precious coral in the strictest tiers of the International Wildlife Treaty sites. 4 species were added to a third, lighter tier in 2008, and that tier is about monitoring, not prohibition. The United States twice proposed stronger protection, in 2007 and again in 2010. Both times, the proposal failed. So the honest reason old coral is scarce isn't a global ban. It's simpler and sadder. The beds have been worked hard for centuries, and the carvers are fewer every year. Coral still crosses borders under real rules, though, and those rules change. So check your state's regulations before you sell or ship. Now your home test. Real coral, under a magnifier, shows fine parallel growth lines, like grain in a piece of wood. Dyed bone looks porous and speckled. Plastic looks like nothing at all. Smooth, dead, even. And coral has real heft. Plastic never does. Number 8. The dressed cameo. The one wearing jewellery of her own. Get close to the carving now. Closer than feels polite. Look at her throat, her ear. where her hair is pinned up. Is she wearing jewelry? If there's a tiny necklace at her throat, a little drop at her ear, a glint of something set into the stone itself, you may be holding what the trade calls a cameo habile, the French word for dressed. And here's what almost everyone misses. That glint is very often a real gemstone, a diamond or pearl or ruby set by hand into the carving by a jeweler. Not painted, not carved to imitate a stone, set with a tiny bezel by a person with tools. So take a magnifier to your cameo's neck. If you see a setting, a little claw, a rim of metal holding something in place, stop. Don't clean it, don't poke it, take it to a professional. Now, if you've come this far with me, subscribe to American Tool Legends, not because I need the number, because there is a woman watching right now with one of these in a drawer, and she'll never see this video unless somebody like you helps it travel. And while we're paused, hear the thing I mean most in this entire video. Nothing here replaces a certified appraiser. Please check with a certified appraiser and with your state and local regulations before you buy, sell, or insure anything valuable. I'm here to help you ask better questions, not to answer the last one. Number 7. The little painted window, reverse crystal, sometimes called Essex crystal. This isn't technically a cameo at all, and yet it lives in cameo boxes all over America, and it may be the most overlooked treasure on this list. Picture a smooth dome of clear rock crystal, and floating inside it, in 3 dimensions, a tiny painted animal. A fox, a terrier, a bird in the reeds, a horse mid-jump. The way it was done will stop your heart a little. A craftsman carved the image backwards into the flat underside of the crystal, then hand-painted it from behind, in reverse, with brushes as fine as a single hair, and sealed it with mother of pearl. The dome magnifies the painting, and the creature seems to hover inside the stone. It's called Essex crystal after a Victorian miniature painter named William Essex, who had nothing whatsoever to do with making them. The public assumed such beautiful things must be his. The wrong name stuck for 150 years. And these sell. At auction in Britain, a late Victorian reverse crystal pendant of a stork among the bulrushes brought £1,037. A brooch with 2 little finches, £732. A pair of cufflinks, £875. Now, the fakes. Instead of carving crystal, cheats painted a picture on a flat backing and laid moulded glass over it. So look at the piece from the side, through the edge, with a magnifier. On a real one, you see real depth. On a fake, everything sits flat on one plane, like a decal. Number 6, the Hardstone cameo. The small, cold, serious one. Hardstone cameos are carved from agate, sardonyx and onyx. Real stone, with real colour bands running through it, which the carver exploits to stand a white face against a dark ground. They're often no bigger than a nickel, and to an untrained eye, a little black and white cameo looks like the cheapest thing in the box. It is frequently the most expensive. Shell is soft. A skilled hand can carve one in days. Stone can take months, and one wrong stroke destroys everything. Hardstone was always the luxury tier, made for people with genuine money. Here are your tests, and every one is free. Temperature. Press it lightly to your cheek. Real stone feels distinctly cold, and it stays cold. Light. Hold it to a lamp. Shell glows at the thin edges. Stone stays dark. And weight. Stone is dense. Pick it up with your eyes closed, and it announces itself. But I'd rather be honest than exciting, so hear this too. Hardstone does not automatically mean a fortune. At the Bonham's Grand Tour sale, a Hardstone cameo of Alexander the Great sold for £1,020. That's a lovely result. It is not a lottery ticket. And anyone telling you otherwise is selling you something. Number 5. The set. The suite. The parure. This may be the most expensive mistake in the entire jewellery box, and it's a mistake made out of kindness. In the 1800s, fine cameos were often made as a matched set. The French word is parure. A necklace, a brooch, a bracelet, earrings, sometimes fittings for a tiara, all from the same material, by the same hand, in a fitted case lined with velvet. Then 150 years go by, and there are 3 daughters, and a mother who loves all 3 of them equally divides the set, the necklace to one, the brooch to another, the earrings to the third, and in that one loving afternoon, most of the value evaporates. Let me show you what's at stake. On the Antiques Roadshow in San Diego, The jewelry specialist Peter Szymanski examined a Hardstone cameo parure by Tiffany and Company, made around 1864, a complete suite. He put the insurance value at $25,000 to $35,000 for the set. Broken up, those same pieces are a handful of nice cameos, worth a fraction of it. So if there's a fitted case in your house, a shabby leather box with a shaped velvet interior, do not throw it away. It isn't packaging, it's provenance. And if you have pieces that match, get the set appraised as a set before anyone divides anything. Number 4. The cameo you may not be allowed to sell. I promised you honesty, so let's talk about what other videos leave out. Some of the loveliest cameos in America are carved from materials now tangled in federal and state law. Cameos were carved in ivory. They were set into tortoiseshell. They were framed with coral. All beautiful. All regulated. Here's the shape of it in plain English. Under the Endangered Species Act, there is what's called an antiques exemption, but it is narrow. Broadly, the piece must be at least 100 years old. It must not have been repaired with restricted material since the early 1970s, and critically, the burden of proving all of that falls on you, the seller, not the buyer, not the auction house, you. And several states go further. New York, California, New Jersey, Hawaii, and others have their own bans, and in some of them, a genuine 200-year-old antique still cannot legally be sold. Many auction houses simply stopped touching the material rather than carry the risk. Now hear the tone in my voice, because I am not scolding you. Owning an inherited piece is very different from selling one. If grandmother's ivory cameo sits in your drawer, you are almost certainly fine. It's the moment money changes hands that the law wakes up. So if you think you have one, don't list it and don't ship it. Look up your state's current rules and talk to a certified appraiser who has handled this before. Number 3. The one that isn't a cameo at all, and the test that will ruin it. For every genuine carved cameo in America, there are a dozen molded ones, and the good molds fool nearly everybody. But first, a warning. You'll find people online telling you to heat a needle and press it into the back because plastic melts and shell doesn't. Do not do that. It is a destructive test. It permanently damages a genuine antique, it can burn you, and it is completely unnecessary. No appraiser worth the name would do that to your grandmother's brooch. Put the needle away. Here's what to do instead. 1. Turn it over and feel the back. A real shell cameo is cut from a curved shell, so the back is curved. A gentle dish. A perfectly flat, perfectly even back is a warning sign. 2. Backlight it. Genuine shell is thin enough to glow, and you'll often see a soft shadow of the carving coming through. Plastic sits there like a wall. 3. Magnify it and hunt for undercutting, where the carver cut in behind a curl of hair, so it stands away from the background. A rigid mold physically cannot release a shape that cuts back under itself. Undercutting is a human fingerprint. 4. And this is my favourite. If you have a matched pair, compare the faces. 2 hand-carved faces are never quite identical. 2 molded faces are twins. Perfect sameness is the tell. And 5. Check the very edge. All the way around. There's a nasty trick where a thin slice of real shell is glued onto a plastic backing. It passes the first glance. It does not pass the edge. Number 2. The signature the size of a grain of rice. In the 1800s, a small handful of Italian gem engravers reached the summit of this craft, and royalty chased their work across Europe. Here are their real names, spelled correctly, so you can look them up tonight. Tommaso Solini and his son Luigi of Rome. When Queen Victoria wanted a portrait of herself and Prince Albert carved for the badges of the royal order she created in his memory, it was Solini she turned to. Those badges sit in the royal collection today, and in the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. Giuseppe Girometti, head engraver at the Papal Mint in Rome. The British Museum holds his carving of Hercules. And then, Benedetto Pistrucci, who became chief medalist of the Royal Mint. Here is the best story in this whole craft. When he was young, a dealer in Rome was taking his carvings and passing them off as ancient Roman antiquities, pocketing the difference. So Pistrucci began secretly hiding a tiny Greek letter, a lambda, inside his work, so that one day the truth could be proved. He carved a signature nobody was ever meant to find, and people have been finding them ever since. So where do signatures hide? On a Hardstone cameo. Look along the front edge, at the base of the neck, where the bust is cut off. Often you'll find a name followed by a single letter F. That F stands for the Latin word fecit. It means, he made this. On a shell cameo, the signature is scratched faintly on the back, and it looks for all the world like somebody scribbled on your brooch. That scribble may be the most valuable thing you own. But I won't lie to you. Signatures get forged, and famous names get added later by hopeful hands. A signature is a reason to see a professional. It is not, by itself, a payday. Number 1. The cameo that is older than the jewellery it lives in. The carving and the setting do not have to be the same age. And very often, they are not. Think it through. A young man goes to Italy on the Grand Tour in 1820. He buys a carved gem, carries it home loose in a pocket, and a jeweller in London sets it into a brooch for his wife. 40 years later, fashion changes, and their daughter has that same gem taken out and remounted into something modern. The carving is now living inside jewellery decades younger than itself. This is not a fringe idea. Napoleon had his coronation crown studded with genuine antique cameos, pulled from old collections, precisely because ancient stones carried the authority he wanted. Grand Tour travellers did the same on a smaller scale, for a century. So how do you spot it at your kitchen table? You look for the mismatch. Does the metal rim hug the cameo evenly all the way around? Or does it rise and dip, wandering to follow a curve that doesn't quite fit? Almost like a saddle. Is there packing behind the stone? Little shims of metal or paper, holding it snug in a hole it was never made for? Look at the wear. Is the mount crisp and sharp, while the carving is soft and rubbed with age? 200 years of a woman's thumb polishes a cameo in a way no jeweller can fake. And does a severe, classical Roman profile sit inside a fussy, sentimental Victorian frame full of curls? Those two did not grow up together, because here's what the mismatch may be telling you. The brooch is not the treasure. The brooch is the box, and the treasure is the little carved stone inside it, which may be far older than anyone in your family ever imagined. That is how an important gem ends up in a costume jewellery drawer in Ohio. Not by magic, just by 150 years of people resetting things they loved. Now let me tell you why nobody in the trade ever taught you any of this. Everything I've given you today has one thing in common. It cannot be patented. It cannot be packaged and sold to you again next season. And a $300 shell cameo doesn't earn its own page in a glossy auction catalogue. It gets swept into a group lot, a collection of cameo jewellery, 4 pieces, and sold in a bundle. So the people who know the most about these objects have almost no commercial reason to teach you to look at them one at a time. The knowledge isn't hidden. It's just unprofitable. And I'll say something that may annoy a few dealers watching. That free verbal valuation at the counter is not an appraisal. It is an offer to buy. Those are different things, and the difference has cost American families a great deal of money. So here's what I'd like you to do this week. Find the box. Sit down at the kitchen table with a good lamp and your reading glasses and go through it one piece at a time. Turn every cameo over. Look at the clasp. Look at the carat mark. Hold her to the light and see whether she glows. And when you find her, wait a moment before you rush off to sell anything, because you are not holding merchandise. You are holding what somebody chose. Somebody stood in a shop a very long time ago and picked out this face, this profile, this little carved woman, and thought, yes, her. That's the one I want to wear near my heart. Now I want to hear from you and be specific. First question. Which way does the lady on your cameo face? Left or right? Left is the rare one. Tell me in the comments, and let's find out how many of us are sitting on the uncommon one. Second, let's have an honest argument. I said the frame is often worth more than the carving. Some collectors hate hearing that, and they'll tell me the artistry is the whole point. So tell me where you land. Am I being too practical? Or is the gold the real story? I read every one of these, and I'd like to be argued with. The free cameo blueprint is waiting in the description. All 15 categories, the marks, the tests, and the sources. Every one of them real. Every one of them checkable. And please, before you buy, sell, or insure anything you found today, check with a certified appraiser and with your own state and local regulations. I am not one, and I never will be. I'm just an old friend telling you where to look. Take care of yourself, go find her, and I'll see you in the next one.